firmly married, is what he said. But as he said it, swayed a little in my direction, the hair on his neck so like my son's, barely there, but golden if you bothered looking. He was looking at me anyway, no matter what he said, a benefit of having spoken his excuses so I'd excuse anything he did thereafter. I walked away. And afterwards I thought how easily he'd escaped whatever I may have taken from that look, that he wanted it to be my invention, the way I used to pull my stockings up, pretending not to notice Richie watching when I was 19 and wanted secretly my first time to happen already, but wanted it to be his doing, this undoing I longed for desperately, the way that this man wants some blameless ruin. So from my second book, which is called The Other Life, which also came from Storyline Press, I'm going to read a poem called Those Winter Sundays. And if you are a poet or a poetry lover, and you all are, you know whose poem that this is modeled on. Sweet Robert Hayden. Could never measure up to that poem by him, but maybe I'll remind you to go back to his Those Winter Sundays. Mine is Those Summer Sundays. Sundays, my father would join us at the club pool, his skin white and delicate as cigarette paper, on the one day he took from the women who lined his waiting room month after month. I waited at the shallow end. He rose from the board and dropped straight as a table knife, without a splash. Always, the women stared, women from whose bodies he had pulled daughters, released sons, and never would he surface until he had maneuvered through the depths to the place where I stood. Giddy, I would close my eyes as he hoisted me from the flawless water on his shoulders, the two of us one thing, perfect and tall. I did not know then of the sometimes dangerous entrances of men, how some will lift what others slowly drown. This next poem has made more money than any other poem I've ever written, so I thought I might share it. I won a prize, and then I kept getting invited to be published in other things, and I kept getting paid, and I thought, oh, is that how it goes? Doesn't always go that way. Living room. In the cave of memory, my father crawls now, his small carbide light fixed to his forehead, his knee pads so worn from the journey, they're barely useful, but he adjusts them again and again. Sometimes he arches up, measures himself against the wayward height of the ceiling, which in this part of the cave is at best uneven. He often hits his head. Other times he suddenly stoops, winces, calls out a name, sometimes the pet name he had for my long-dead mother, or the name he called his own. That's when my stepmother tries to call him back. Honey man, she says, one hand on his cheek, the other his shoulder, settling him into the one chair he sometimes stays in. There are days she discovers him curled beneath the baby grand, and she's learned to lie down with him. I am here, she says, her body caved against this man who every day deserts her. Bats, he says, or maybe field glasses. Perhaps he's back in France, 1944, she doesn't know. But soon he's up again on his knees, shushing her, checking his headlamp, adjusting his knee pads, and she rises to her own knees. She doesn't know what else to do. The two of them, She doesn't know what else to do. The two of them, explorers, whose thinning pin of light leads them, making their slow way through this room named for the living. It's kind of fun to take a poem out of, it's interesting, you're just looking at your own growth as a writer, and so it was interesting to just choose poems for this reading. And you are such a wonderful audience already. You're so nice and quiet. Would you mind if I take a picture of you? It's so amazing to be in a real room with real people. And not that the fake ones are the fake ones when you're doing Zoom reading, but this is just too wonderful, so I hope you don't mind. I'm just going to take a few shots. It won't. A single panel of one of Rauschenberg's white paintings, which in this analogy might be titled The 35-Year Deception. Each lie, not the same lie. Each piece, a woman he met through an app or an ad, online or inline at Walmart, Walgreens, even the Home Depot. One in her 20s took him for $2,000 and kept stringing him along but never finally slept with him. My ex told me this, I tell John, as if that fact could erase what he did and kept doing. During his confession, he couldn't remember which woman was which and kept correcting himself the way one might try to position and reposition the same puzzle piece into a place that looks exactly right, but isn't. I knew enough should be enough, and I want this to be my last poem about that man. It's rare that I think about him, I say, so why, and now I'm really talking to myself, does he appear in a poem I'm writing about something else? One thing's for sure, puzzles have always intrigued me, so I don't give up. I never gave up even on the Jackson Pollock that overtook our dining table for months. And I didn't give up on the Milky Way, so large we finally moved it to the garage, where we laid it with care on a workbench not much in use. That same year, I tell John, I sent a snapshot to a company that offered to make an enlargement into a jigsaw puzzle. The three of us posed together one winter in red, matching woolen hats, snow whitening the rooftop of our house behind us, the sky solid and blue above it, a Norman Rockwell. After our son fit his father's blue eyes into his father's face, he wanted us to frame and hang it above the piano, but we never did, and it stayed on one side of the dining table till mid-February, which still puzzles me. A woman who almost obsessively gets things done without much delay. Every time I walked past it, I saw what appeared at first to be a perfect family, but up close revealed the fine jigsawed lines and odd shapes that pay no regard to content, our faces crazed like pieces of expensive porcelain, or like the faces in paintings by old Dutch masters, subtleties of expression and the truth behind them obscured over time by varnish that darkens and discolors even the snow. I don't have a good reason, I finally tell John, hoping he'll see what I'm beginning to accept when I sit down to write. Like my philandering ex, a poem will, no matter the cost or consequence, and without any consideration of me, go wherever it wants, whenever it wants, to satisfy its desires. It's so great to hear laughter, It's hard to write poems that are funny. So my last poem takes place about 6 blocks from where I live. I live on Southwest 6th Avenue in Portland, very close to the Willamette River. And this is a poem I wrote after my first walk, after we got our vaccinations and felt a little safer going out. It's called Along the Willamette, April 2021. At the river's edge, some kind of grassy plant I can't identify, and detritus I can. 2 blue, almost collapsed helium balloons, and a silver one a foot or so above the water, fighting to get away, its birthday message in red block letters for someone named Kate, their strings tangled together in the river. For more than a year I'd stayed away, but this morning, the air sweet and cool, I wandered the 6 blocks to the river, wanting an hour of my old life back, my routine of walking the wide path, maybe a few gulls, persistent pigeons, early morning runners, people on bikes. Everything I asked for is here. And now the sun, held back by fat white clouds when I left my apartment, breaks through, lighting the water. Almost on cue, 5 kayaks paddle by, causing a rush of waves to knock and knock against the bank, releasing the silver balloon, which rises into the bluing sky, and a dozen geese in that familiar V I've missed, their long black necks stretched into exclamation marks above it, honk almost in unison, as if to celebrate. Happy birthday, Kate, I say. Happy myself not to be anywhere else.